I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a step back from gameplay and taking a step forwards into the inventory screen, as I talk about some of my favourite bosses from each Soulsborne game based on their backstory and lore. From Software has such a rich tapestry of stories to tell, and sometimes there's a boss that inherently resonates with me as I look into their backstories and the tragedies that surround them. While this video is going to be about my favourite lore bosses, I'm not opposed to making this a small series, as there are so many fights per game with fascinating lore that I would love to cover. So let me know if it's something that interests you. So let's jump right in. My favourite bosses based on their lore from each Soulsborne game, ranked. Let me know your picks down below. For Demon Souls, I want to talk about Latria, and more specifically, the boss of the Prison of Hope, the Fool's Idol. An animated doll who was created in the image of the Queen of Latria, she lives up to her namesake as an idol for the prison's inmates to worship and adhere to. You see, the original Queen of Latria was beloved by her people, and the land of the Ivory Tower was once a bustling kingdom. But the old monk, who was once Latria's husband, found himself banished for unknown reasons, and upon being possessed by the golden garb that now adorns his body, he returned to Latria, murdered his wife, and imprisoned her family within the prison. Yet that murder was kept a secret. For the doll created in her image is a deception against the prisoners themselves. The old monk takes them for fools by showing them the image of their glorious queen before the gargoyles come down into the church to take them above for redemption. And as we know, that redemption was about as false as it could get. Inmates taken away were experimented upon to create more of his demonic army, and as the church for redemption was so far away from the prison itself, those still locked up were none the wiser of this deceit. As for her boss fight, the Fool's Idol having mastery over magic was part of the Queen's influence. Latria was a gifted sorceress, and the likelihood that her soul was used to create the doll meant that this demon had those very same powers over magic. Soul arrows, paralysis wards, it makes you wonder whether the Queen was as kind as you'd think, or whether maybe she was actually as bad as her treacherous husband. I don't think we'll ever know. For Dark Souls, it's like picking between my favourite children, but anybody who's seen my channel, you know where this is going. Artorias the Abyss Walker was one of the 4 Knights of Gwyn, alongside Lord's Blade Kieran, Hawkeye Goch, and Dragonslayer Ornstein. They were each responsible for carrying out the will of their lord and keeping peace in the realm. While Ornstein and Goch specialized in taking on dragons, and Kieran delved into the art of assassination, Artorias was a true knight, determined to help stop the spread of the Abyss. It's heavily implied that he created a covenant with one of the primeval serpents, likely Karth, in order to traverse the Abyss and fight back against the dark wraiths of New Londo, but his main story revolves around the town of Ulasil. Here, he was sent to stop Manus, father of the Abyss, who was revived by the foolish sorcerers of the town, and alongside his trusted wolf Sif, they took the fight to the creature, but he was ultimately defeated. Giving Sif the opportunity to escape, Artorias fought desperately, but just couldn't kill Manus, taking grievous wounds as he retreated. Wounds that would soon have him succumbing to the Abyss itself. For when we, the chosen undead, discover him, the corruptive influence of the Abyss has taken hold, and we're forced to put down this powerful knight before he can do more harm. Why I love Artorias so much is that his lore existed before he appeared in the DLC, as legends of his deeds were spoken of in the base game, and you can of course fight Sif and receive his Covenant of Artorias ring to traverse the Abyss yourself. So the plot twist that the one who truly saved Ulasil, the real Abyss Walker, was your chosen undead, and it was just covered up to give Artorias an honourable send-off, remembered as a champion and not as a knight who fell to the influence of Manus's homophobia it's great storytelling. He's such an influential figure, setting the blueprint for tragic boss fights across the series, and heck, he even has a fan club in Dark Souls 3 with the Abyss Watchers. I'm not seeing a fan club for the Gaping Dragon, am I? For Dark Souls 2, this was actually the entry that inspired this video topic. Let's discuss the Old Iron King. In the beginning, he was but a lowly lord with no status, embroiled in a rivalry with a neighbouring nation. His plight drew the attention of Sir Alon of the East, who swore allegiance to the lordling, and with Sir Alon and his own resources, the Old Iron King was able to establish a kingdom by overcoming that neighbouring nation. He ruled over his lands from Broom Tower, having discovered the scorching hot scepter that allowed him to activate various mechanical contraptions, which started a production of iron that led to his eventual title. However, power corrupts, and the Iron King's successes led to a long reign that was fraught with bad decisions. Like a 21-year-old getting their first paycheck, he put his money in all the wrong places, entertaining faraway guests including the Magus Egil, who became an important member of the king's court, displaying countless powerful, expensive weapons for all to see, creating the Iron Keep so that he could flaunt his success at every opportunity to those visiting. And yet, as it is with Dark Souls 2, the undead curse struck, and he ordered all those affected to be rounded up by his loyal executioners, who ultimately became the skeleton lords of the Huntsman's Copse. Those plagued with the curse were then taken to the undead purgatory, where the executioner's chariot, which was created by the Old Iron King, would slaughter them over and over for an eternity until they hollowed. And this was the last straw. Sir Alon abandoned his former king, disappointed by the depravity he'd sunken into, or so we thought. Instead, it's revealed that the bearer of the curse killed Sir Alon in combat, and I don't think it's a stretch to assume the Old Iron King knew about this. He named his knights after Sir Alon, and the Bewitched Alon sword description says, when he departed, the Old Iron King bequeathed Sir Alon's name to his Iron Warriors. Departed has a lot of different meanings, but I have always associated it with death, or aeroplanes, but mostly death when someone departs for the next life. But we had to kill Alon for history to go as planned, as following his death, the Old Iron King only had the Magus Egil to turn to, who helped the king to construct the golem we fight in the Iron Keep, known as the Smelter Demon. It immediately turned on its master, slaying the king in one fell swoop. The fire engulfed the king's corpse, possessing his soul, to create an endless flow of lava, which rose up to ruin his kingdom. And then his body was possessed again, sunken below the earth, to meet the one whose name must never be repeated, theorized to be the soul of Gwyn, but it's not confirmed, which ultimately created the Old Iron King we see in-game. Had we not killed Sir Alon, the Old Iron King likely survives the encounter with the Smelter Demon, meaning we can never obtain the Lord's Soul. So our actions and good old time travel force us to create tragedy to keep our goals in view. The Old Iron King has so much influence over the entire portion of the game leading up to him, from the Huntsman's Copse to Harvest Valley, as I believe Mitha is into the Old Iron King and he's the one she's been trying to impress. And I think that's what makes him the most interesting boss in this game for me, because he's just tied up with so much shit. For Bloodborne, I have a few bosses I wish I could cover, but for today's video, let's go simple and talk about Gehrman, the First Hunter, as he's such a focal part of the game, even if you wouldn't know it upon first meeting. Gehrman was the original founder of the Hunter's Workshop, an organization created to fight back against the beasts that plague Yharnam. Of course, the call is coming from inside the house, as the Healing Church and the Old Blood is the reason for this madness in the first place, but hey, that just means job security, baby. He was more than just the founder of the workshop though, for Gehrman was also tied to Byrgenwerth, as many of the major players in Bloodborne were. While the timeline isn't quite clear to me, Gehrman, Maria, and the Byrgenwerth scholars invaded the fishing hamlet of the DLC and killed the Orphan of Kos, which in turn created the Hunter's Nightmare. This guilt haunted Gehrman even to the events of the game, and by killing the Orphan of Kos ourselves, we're able to dispel that pain and allow him brief respite within the dream. At some point, he met and began training Lady Maria, a student that he aimed to get a little flirty with, which was never going to work out. She's clearly into women. His mania about her led to him creating a doll in her image, which then becomes the doll we find in the Hunter's dream. This spectral space created by the beckoned moon presence, where Gehrman volunteered to reside. He became a permanent aid to hunters moving forwards, slaying them when the time was right and offering them mercy, while remaining trapped by the Great One in charge. The doll coming to life was likely a concession to make Gehrman comfortable, but of course, it didn't have the fiery temperament of Lady Maria completely subservient, and thus it would never make him happy. In fact, all he wants is for the dream to end, and yet he cannot do this himself. It's not until your hunter comes along and challenges him that we're finally able to put him to rest. I pity Gehrman, even if he was a bit of a freak. Being stuck in that dream for an eternity would make anybody go mad. And also, fun fact, it's his clothing that inspired every hunter's garb, going for this lightweight style that emphasized speed, meaning all the drip we see in Yharnam is thanks to Gehrman. Thanks, old man. For Dark Souls 3, I'd say my favorite boss in terms of lore goes to Aldrich, Devourer of Gods, who is certainly one of the more fucked up characters in the series. One of the four Lords of Cinder, he started off as a humble cleric who was a part of the battle between the Church and the Deep. He also happened to be a man-eater who loved a good bit of human flesh, but that wouldn't come into play until later. He rose to prominence and power thanks to his visions of a coming age of the deep sea. In his mind, the deep wasn't an abyss, but the bottom of an ocean, and humanity would sink down to become the anchors of the new world. Initially, he worked to keep the monsters of the deep from the world, while stopping humans from accessing the powers of the deep themselves, as the miracles from it were dark and twisted, but his visions were ultimately what led him down the path he took. He founded the Church of the Deep, with its cathedral being the base of operations, and with his influence growing, he took in sacrifices to gain power. Adults, children, nobody was safe from Aldrich's clutches, with only two known escapees, Henri and Horace, who you meet on your journey. While it's unclear why Aldrich initially linked the First Flame, as I don't think it's specified in-game, I suspect it either wasn't a voluntary action, or it was an action needed to spur Aldrich's visions of the future to fruition. Upon being revived, however, he set his sights on a new target, the old gods of Anor Londo. Guinevere left Anor Londo long ago, so her safety was always assured, but Gwyndolin still remained, and with the help of Pontiff Sullivan, who came from the painted world of Ariandel to rise in Aldrich's ranks, they were able to corner the optional femboy of the Souls series to consume him, though not before Gwyndolin was able to save Yorshka, his sister, who did a great job hiding, by the way, right outside Aldrich's front door. That's never questioned. In Aldrich's boss fight, we see that not only he has the power of Gwyndolin, but also signature moves belonging to Priscilla and Nito as well, techniques taken from his dreams, visions of past gods. His aim was to devour the very gods, so that he could kickstart the Age of the Deep. Yet the Ashen One said, "No, do your job, puta," and we ultimately slay Aldrich, put Gwyndolin's soul to rest, and take down the entire operation of the Church of the Deep. There's no room for this deep nonsense when I have an Age of Dark on the way. For Sekiro, I know I've talked about him before, but the Demon of Hatred, also known as the Sculptor, is just such a fascinating side character to me. His tale begins as a shinobi who in his travels met a female shinobi called Kingfisher. They chose to abandon the life of serving masters, taking residence in the sunken valley where they would train their skills with the wildlife. His name ultimately became Orangutan because he adopted the movements of the monkeys that lived there, and they had a good life. He got drunk with the monkeys while she created beautiful whistles with her ring. But all good things come to an end, and Kingfisher was slain in a battle against the Guardian Ape, leaving Orangutan to wander the lands alone. His nihilistic views after this caused him to fall to Shura, killing all those in his path as he slowly began to lose his sanity, until he picked a fight with the wrong man, Isshin Ashina. He was easily defeated, losing an arm as penance, but was ultimately spared by Isshin, who allowed Dogen, a legendary doctor, to take him in and heal him. With his Shura quelled, Dogen developed the shinobi prosthetic for the Sculptor, who ended up using it to create the prosthetic arts skill tree, but in the process began to get more violent in the defense of the country. With a little bit of self-reflection, it led to him abandoning his post and dedicating himself to Buddha in order to tame the demon lurking within him. His hatred, his malice, he hoped that by secluding himself and carving Buddhas, he'd keep it at bay. There were so many charms placed around the temple, you'd think no evil spirits could enter, but you'd be wrong. He gained a reprieve though by taking in Wolf after his battle with Genichiro, fitting in with the shinobi prosthetic and helping him across his journey by upgrading his various tools. He's able to stop another shinobi from falling down his path, and his reward is that thanks to his help, Sekiro gains the power needed to help slay him in the end. As during the attack on Ashina, the demon of hatred bursts forth, creating a fiery blaze that forms a deadly yokai, a Japanese creature of folklore who can no longer distinguish friend from foe. So we defeat him, overcoming his power, and in his final moments, he regains his sanity to thank us for putting him to rest. The Sculptor may not have been able to have a happy ending, but I feel he ultimately redeemed himself by his aid of Sekiro, and the universe listened. Lastly, for Elden Ring, let's talk DLC as we take a look at the complexities of Messmer the Impaler. As the newest boss on this list, I could certainly get some of his lore incorrect, but I am going by what I've seen in-game and read over the last few months. If there's anything wrong, let me know in the description below. Messmer was the child of Marika and Radagon, the same as Melina, Melania, and Mikola, which was already a great start because that meant he was cursed from the get-go. He was born with the base serpent within him, which was sealed away by Marika as she plucked out one of his eyes, replacing it with a seal of grace to keep it at bay. With a surprising amount of charisma, Messmer was able to draw people of all different walks of life to his cause when Marika ordered him to take arms in the Land of Shadow. From the common folk, to nobles, to Rolana Twin Moon Knight, literal Karian royalty who denounced her lineage to follow him into the fray. He was beloved by those who believed in him, those who were outcast and ignored. Look at Commander Gaius, who became one of his most trusted knights after they became like brothers during their training. An Albinoric and a cursed demigod, both shackled from birth by fates they couldn't change, which also connected him to Radahn, who was also close to Gaius and Messmer during their training. Yet Marika's vengeance on the Tower Settlement was looming, and Messmer was the perfect choice. Completely loyal to his mother, he wouldn't question her authority, and with her blessings, he waged war on the Land of Shadow, impaling indiscriminately, burning Bellarat to the ground, inadvertently causing Ramina to look for a miracle in the god of rot, and he became a proper dictator. He was willing to sacrifice his image for those who believed in him, and for his mother whom he would do anything for. But when Marika was imprisoned following the Shattering, there was radio silence. The folk began to doubt Marika's intentions. Had she abandoned Messmer, they couldn't have known the truth. And his cursed nature eventually caused various knights to abandon him, including 2 of his most trusted Black Knights. All of the world's ire was directed at Messmer, and he took this attempt at cancel culture on the chin. If only his mother would just send him a DM, let him know that she still cares. Hell, she could use Skype. Then we arrive, guided by grace. He was too far gone. There was naught to do but take down this self-loathing serpent, claim his kindling, and go after his brother in Ene Elim. So he fights us, apologizes to his mother at the midpoint, and releases the abyssal serpent. But it's not enough. In the end, he curses Marika with his last breath, finally having gotten fed up with his mother. He never found out the truth that she was imprisoned, and I firmly believe we were led to Messmer by the guidance of grace, by Marika herself, so that we could put her son to rest. It's all she could do from her position, and really highlights the tragedy of Messmer the Impaler. He's not a good person, for he's still committed all those acts in his mother's name willingly, but he bore so much pain and hatred for the majority of his life, was betrayed by people he considered close to him multiple times, lost everything, and for what? That's the question, isn't it? And that's my list. What bosses are your favorites from a lore perspective? Let me know down below, and be sure to give me suggestions, because I would love to do a follow-up video to this with even more bosses. Let me know your favorites, come on, do it, you want to. And of course, be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. My social medias are on screen now, feel free to follow me if you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter or my Discord. My Twitter is the best place to go, or maybe check out my community tab, I like posting there as well. A massive shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month, thank you so much. It's quite busy for me at the moment, so I'm a little bit stressed out, so having you guys chill in and supporting the channel, it just means the world. And I'll see you guys next time for another video. Adios.